You're watching this video, probably, because you're thinking of hiring a contractor and you don't want to get scammed. The reality of our times is, or one of the reality of these times is, that more and more people are being stolen from by unscrupulous or perhaps just unschooled contractors, and people hate it. So I'm going to tell you 9 things that you've just got to do before you hire a contractor, or at least that you've got to know before you hire a contractor. But before I dive into that, I want to talk for just a minute about the different climate, the different ecosystem that we live in now relative to hiring someone to do construction work on your house or on a new project that you want to accomplish. You probably are aware that Mike Rowe Works, has been talking and warning for a long time about a trade gap, the deficit, the shortage of blue-collar workers that was just over the horizon because of the emphasis that had been placed for a generation or two on college degrees as the way to fulfillment and success and, real life. The trade gap that Mike was warning us about for the last 15 years or so is here. We're living in a world, or at least in a country, where too few people have been attracted to the trades, and so trade work, building, construction, maintenance, improvement, property improvement is somewhere between hard and impossible to get accomplished in a reasonable period of time at a reasonable level of quality for what we perceive as being a reasonable amount of money. There are increasing horror stories of people who have paid for services and never received the services, or paid for services that were so substandard that everything that was paid for had to be torn out and either started again or forgotten as a hopeless dream that could never be accomplished because you couldn't find the people to do it. So not all of the news in this new construction environment is negative, i.e. nobody to do the work and all the work is overpriced. The elephant in the living room is that more now than ever, DIY, do-it-yourself, could be an option. Now you know that I'm a bit of a zealot for doing things yourself, or at least the things that are reasonable for one to do himself. But the fact is that if you can't find somebody to do it for you, but you can find the information and the training and the examples and the products and the processes and the tools to do it, then maybe the opportunity to solve your own problems is knocking on your door, and you just need to recognize that and think about opening that door. Now clearly, I have a dog in the fight here in that I have a YouTube channel that talks a lot about, how to do stuff. But the internet, and specifically YouTube, is full of people who are showing us how to do everything, showing us the tools, showing us the products, giving us the vendors, and then letting us watch them do the things that maybe you or I need to do in our homes, on our properties, and can't find someone else to do. What that means is it's time to put on a tool belt and get some work done. Now let me rewind the tape to the first part of this conversation about avoiding being scammed. So that's job 1. You may be intended not to do this yourself, but are intending to hire someone. And there are some things that you need to know about how to do that, because yes, you still can find the person to do it. But I've got a little list of things that I expanded on in a little book that you can get a hold of either on Amazon or on in our Essential Craftsman Academy. So let me dive into some ways that I think you can find, evaluate, manage, and conclude a successful project with a contractor that may or may not exist in your area, and then talk a little more about some new ways to approach DIY and where to get the information that will keep you out of trouble, even if it's only you that could get you into trouble. Number 1, finding the right person. Resources for finding the right person are all around you, and they all require you to get out of your comfort zone in communicating with people in your community. Go to material suppliers. Talk to other subcontractors. Talk to your friends and family. Cold call some people and ask them, if you were going to hire someone to do X, Y, or Z, who would you use? It's an easy question to ask. Who would you use? And then keep some sort of a little job log, some sort of a paper trail of the answers. And pretty soon, you're going to see the same 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 names showing up over and over. So you've got to take the initiative and do that in your conversations. The next thing to think about is how to interview these guys. You need to set up a formal interview time. You need to make sure that they're not overlapping with other commitments or other visits from contractors. There is nothing worse than talking to somebody about what you want them to do for you, and it runs over time, and the next guy drives up with his pickup and his dog and his issues, and it just derails the whole train. So use whatever management procedures you've learned or you can learn to properly interview and ask in-depth questions. And one of the best questions is, what kind of work do you like to do the best? Okay? If you find out what it is that they enjoy, you're going to find out what it is that they are best at. And so if you think for just a little while about the questions that you ask and how you keep track of their answers, you're going to feel after the interview like you might know that person well enough to trust them with your thousands of dollars. So here's a practical example. You need an elaborate covered deck built out of the back of your house. And you call contractor X or Y or Z, and they come in and you ask them that question. What do you like to build? What have you built recently? And they say, boy, I really like bathroom remodels. Okay. Maybe they say, well, I love technical concrete jobs. Okay. It won't be until you've talked to 2 or 3 guys that say, I specialize in outdoor hardscape, backyard improvement, deck, covered outdoor living areas, that you begin to realize you're talking to the people who are going to be really good at what you need them to be really good at. Now, the other aspect to this is when you ask for references, you don't want them to give you the 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 or 20 people that they were friends with to begin with and ended up as friends with when the job was done. You want the last 3 or 4 jobs in chronological order. You want the last 4 jobs they did with the start and stop dates and the contact information so you can talk to those people. Because not only do you need to know how the contractor relates to people when things are easy and when communication is relaxed, ideally you need to talk to someone who has been through a storm with this guy and knows how he performs when there's pressure. So chronological references and interview people until you find someone who loves what you need to have done. The next item that is critically important, but I can only hit superficially right now, is learning to read between the lines on the bid documents. And the critical importance of having a construction drawing, even if it's a rough rendering, that you bring to the table in order that everyone that you talk to is going to be more or less on the same page. There's a ton of implication and inference that you can draw from reading the bids when they finally come to you with the price. I'm going to fold the next 2 items into one and just say that when you get right down to the time that it's time to make an agreement, don't be in a hurry. Don't sign right away. Let some time go by. Back up and more due diligence on maybe checking the references. And then the next one is, be a little careful about negotiating the bottom line. Now, there's a lot that can be said about negotiation, but just realize that the person that you want to do the work may negotiate down on price, but you can rest assured that he's going to find some way to mitigate that reduction in his profit by reducing some aspect of the service that you're talking about. So negotiate on the front end carefully, and then have some reasonable expectations about what the upside and downside of that whole process might be. Everybody you talk to has a different opinion on this, but in general, a licensed contractor can, at least ideally, provide some layers of security and protection and comfort. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, based around, the reliability of someone who tries to play by the rules versus someone who can't afford to play by the rules or doesn't know that the rules exist but still does good work. But in general, I'm going to tell you that the licensed, bonded, insured contractors are probably the ones that you want to trust your project to. The next 2 items folded into one is, be aware that your actions can slow down and hurt your job. You have to find some way to be reasonable in your expectations and be able to evaluate whether what it is that you're wanting to go to war over is actually going to win or defeat your interest. And closely related to that is, money is your only muscle. Let me repeat that. Money is the only muscle you bring to this whole interaction. And so be very careful with when and why and to whom you release funds. So rewinding the tape just a little bit and talking about how your actions can negatively impact your job, timelines are important. If you don't have a timeline or an estimated delivery date, you almost don't have a contract. You almost don't have an agreement. And if the timeline is not reasonable, it is going to complicate your job so much and cause so much grief for one or both of the parties that your memory is going to be entirely bitter based on your timeline. So you need to be very careful, get a lot of input, and spend a fair amount of time deliberating how important the timeline is to you and how you're going to enforce it. Drilling down on this just a little deeper and skipping ahead in the chapters of the book to the last chapter, you have to bring a reasonable and clear understanding of the foundational truth of construction. And it's this: how good, how fast, how much. Pick two. The best you're ever going to do is 2 out of 3. The worst you're going to do is 0 out of 3. And keep that in mind in every one of the conversations and every one of the contracts and relationships that you set up for yourself when you're dealing with a contractor. So continuing to flesh out a little more what we flesh out a great deal in the ebook, this is the drawing of a fantasy. And if you think of these 3 characteristics, how fast, how good, how cheap, or how much, as the 3 sort of controlling dynamics of the work that's done when property is improved, everybody wants to get good work done cheaply in a hurry. And you know what? The intersection of those 3 dynamics doesn't exist. It's like a unicorn, right? It's a dragon. Everybody talks about them, and nobody has ever seen one. Now that's an overstatement, because sometimes a young contractor will make the mistake of providing all 3 of those, but he won't be in business 2 years later. So he's not going to be there for the callback if a callback happens. So here's the one that I wish I would have included in the ebook, and I might add. I mean, it's not that hard to revise a digital book. And it's this: the 10th thing is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that we live in a different era now in terms of the accessibility of trade secrets, the accessibility of in-depth information on different materials and processes, in-depth information on what products are available in your part of the world, and good examples of guys doing good work right before your very eyes. So do a realistic assessment of what your skills are. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to try a 30-yard concrete pour with you and your uncle who used to be a laborer on a concrete crew when he was in high school. You just don't want to do that. But you might be ready to tile a countertop. And after the countertop, you might be ready to tile your shower. And maybe, continuing to extend this maybe to a ridiculous degree, you might be able to tile the edge of your hot tub that's put in, or a spa, maybe. You probably don't want to put a new roof on an elaborate, choppy, multi-hip, multi-pitch house that you're living in with your family during the winter. But you might start putting a new roof on your garage, and once you're done with that, you might not be afraid of roofing anymore. So utilize the skills and the real good information that's available on YouTube. I may put a list in the notes to this video of some of the guys that put out videos that I consider to be reliable and informed. I'm thinking of RR Builders as the first one I'll put in there, maybe Perkins Brothers, and there are others. But if you invest some time on the front end in gaining some education and buy a few tools, I get lots of comments and emails and texts and phone calls from people who work IT or in sales and never really had any confidence in their ability to do their own projects, and now are unstoppable. And they're buying lots of tools, but generally their wives are pleased because their projects are getting done, and there's a level of fulfillment and satisfaction in doing the things for yourself that we can do for ourselves. Now, I understand that scrubbing YouTube to find an obscure process on an obscure project is not always, an efficient use of time, because there are rabbit holes and we do dive down them and time goes by. But I'll just let you know that the full copy of this book is available on Amazon. It's available as a perk in our Essential Craftsman Academy. But to the real meat of the matter, twice a month, if you're a member of the Essential Craftsman Academy, we have Shop Talk. It's a live interactive Zoom meeting, and we get dozens of guys who are bringing their questions and their projects. We get dozens of guys who have real in-depth experience and information in areas where I just don't really know much of anything. and we share with each other our questions and our victories and our failures and our solutions. And that, as far as I can tell, is about the best resource for DIY today that exists. So if you're interested, check the notes, go to the website, and you'll find out for yourself whether the Essential Craftsman Academy, which has all of this stuff in spades, could help you, avoid getting scammed. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.